So there goes, I don't know if you saw that, but that was a rainbow lorikeet flying into the tree, and there's another one up at the top of the tree, and they're foraging for food. Um, I think what they do is they usually live on fruit nectar, but I think they can live on any kind of flower nectar. What I've done with this particular video, there was a little pause there, because what I've done is I've actually I took quite a long video. It was only about 5 minutes long, but what I did was I took it on my phone, and it wasn't very clear because these birds are not very large, and it was quite high up in the tree. But I did notice them from a distance, and so what I did was I attempted to film them. I sort of approached the tree, and there was a bit of shakiness at the start, so I had to actually delete like the first 30 seconds of the video, and I decided to start it with the bird flying in. Uh, that second rainbow lorikeet that you saw like fly in right at the beginning, I'd sort of cut the video up to that point because there wasn't really that much interesting before that. But this video goes for quite some time because what I've done is I've decided to, I don't have any actual videos of rainbow lorikeets, and I've been stalking them. I've actually been in the park for like quite some time trying to get a decent video. So it's very hard with these particular birds, and I apologize for the shakiness of the camera. I was going to edit out all of those parts, but I sort of just got rid of the beginning of the video, and I've left the rest because it was just too difficult to put together the different sections and make it so it sort of flowed cohesively. So rather than delay uploading the video, since it's been a couple of months since I've actually uploaded something, I thought that I would just stick with what I had, and just to get they are quite hard to film, and it's hard to hold a camera straight, so that's why it's a bit crooked. But as you can see, they move around quite a bit, and this is actually slowed down footage. So imagine if I hadn't slowed it down, you would just be getting tiny little glimpses of this rainbow lorikeet. There's two of them. I think there might actually be a third one in there, but they're not. That third one isn't really visible, but I'm pretty sure they're two rainbow lorikeets together, or it might be a rainbow lorikeet and another breed of bird because I can't see the head. It's interesting how they're quite colourful birds, but they're obviously in the tree because it's spring and there's a bit of plant nectar, like eucalyptus nectar, that they're looking for. Um, I've noticed they're quite brightly coloured birds, like most parrots are, but except for cockatoos, which are usually mostly white. But um, these particular lorikeets, it's strange because their front of their body is brightly coloured. Their heads are blue, and they've got the yellow and the red at the front. But at the back, when they turn their backs, they're quite green, and as you can see, they kind of blend into their surroundings in spite of their bright colouring. And that's what I find so interesting. But then when they sort of turn a little, you get a glimpse of the bright colouring. So I like these birds. In Australia, they're quite prolific breeders in Australia, and they're not really considered endangered. They're everywhere, and you can actually legally own them as pets as well. But the problem with rainbow lorikeets is that they are nectar-eating birds, and they're very messy. They're beautiful animals, and I mean, someday if I have my own place, if I'm, still living in Australia at that point, I might actually have an outdoor like an aviary, or however you pronounce it, where I have my, like enough space to have like a larger parrots. But I'm not at a point in my life, like I live in a large apartment, so I couldn't really justify. I don't think I would get permission from my landlord either, because they're notoriously messy. They poo everywhere. They basically spray their poo everywhere. Like, it would be like having pigeons basically. So, I mean, there's not really any way around it. They're messy animals, but they are beautiful to look at, and they are very friendly if they're tamed. And I have seen videos online of people who have fed, who don't actually own them as pets, but they feed them in their garden or at home. and so the birds actually just visit them, and they're wild birds, and they are quite friendly. So this particular species of birds, if you have the right type of food, like some kind of fruit nectar, you can actually buy lorikeet feed at like grocery stores over here. So it's quite common for people to own these particular types of birds. But yeah, the noisiness and the mess, and like you would have to have more than one, because like I've learnt from owning a budgie, you can't just have one parrot. They're not really designed that way. I mean, like they are for the most part, the majority, it varies from species to species, but the majority of them are very social, and they need that companionship of having a second bird. I mean, there are sort of certain exceptions. I am considering getting a cockatiel, uh, but I've got two budgies already, so I'm not sure if I'll get permission to have the cockatiel. And I'm also sort of a little bit, sitting on the fence, because I do have allergies, and they are kind of dusty birds, and they also are quite demanding in terms of they need a lot of attention, whereas the budgies that I have, they're not as hands-on. They tend to sort of they will interact with humans, but they're not very touchy-feely kind of birds, and they tend to prefer each other's company over human company, which is the case probably for most birds. But um, these ones are domesticated, obviously. They've been raised in captivity. But anyway, getting back to these wild birds in the wild, nothing really is a substitute for observing birds in the wild. I think like having a captive birds at home, they do have similar behaviors, but um, they're quite different in a lot of ways, because they've adapted to living within a person's home, and they don't 100% behave the same way as an animal would in the wild. But I enjoy watching the like wild parrots and various other birds. I really like the birds that sort of live by rivers, and sort of shorebirds, I guess you would call them. I like those type of birds. They fascinate me, and I find them very intelligent and interesting. And just the whole concept of living near and on the water kind of interests me. But I like parrots as well, but they are harder to study, because when they live in their natural environment, like these two here, um, they sort of the only time you get a glimpse of them is usually when they're engaged in an activity like eating, like these two are trying to eat, I think, or when they're flying, basically. These particular, I do see corellas and cockatoos and galahs a lot. They're very prevalent over here. You see them absolutely everywhere. And princess parrots are another one that I think I see quite a bit of, but not as much as cockatoos. But yeah, there's huge flocks of cockatoos here. But if you ever try to approach them, they will go flying. And even if you have like some kind of food or something, they're a lot more cautious because of their intelligence. I think they just view humans as a threat, so they will not approach you for food the way a lot of other species of birds will. That's what I've noticed. They tend to keep their distance, so they will be around grazing, but as soon as you walk up to them, they will fly off. And what I've noticed about these lorikeets, as opposed to a lot of the other cockatoos and the corellas that there's so many of, they don't tend to walk around on the ground. The cockatoos and galahs, I see them grazing on the ground daily, usually when I'm in the park. But with these lorikeets and the rosellas, I tend to only see them in the treetops. So this is really probably the only way that I could get a close video, is by sort of filming them up in the trees. Um, they're just basically doing the same thing through the whole video, but you do get that glimpse of the bird flying in at the start. So um, yeah, I just thought they were gorgeous, and it would have been a missed opportunity. And I was so lucky that I actually had my phone on me when I caught them, and that they didn't sort of fly off. I approached very, very cautiously, and like partway into me filming the video, I think that they noticed that I was filming them. So they actually did fly off towards the end. But um, I really hope that you enjoyed that, and let me know what